Good morning, everyone. I would like to first welcome Manny Lieras, who will be joined today by his two wonderful daughters to start us off right with an opening song and set our intentions for the day. And Manny, looks like they're blurred. I don't know.
Here, let's see if I can turn that filter off real quick.
Sure.
There we go. So good day, everybody. My name is Manny Lieras. I come from the Navajo and Comanche tribes. I'm here today with my daughter, Lynn, and my daughter, Joni, who are the same tribes, and they're also Shoshone Bannock and Eastern Shoshone. And today we just want to offer an encouragement song that was composed by one of my good friends. His name is Junior Keyswood. And this song is really just to send an intention to let our voices vibrate and send that energy and intentions to you all in your spaces all around, I believe, the Bay Area and maybe even further. With this most recent Supreme Court hearing regarding ICWA, our intentions are also to maintain our sovereignty as tribal nations and to protect our Indian children with this song. So again, we just also want to give thanks to the divine energy, the creator that brought us all into this space that allows us to have air to breathe and water to drink and food to eat, that has provided us with people in our lives, hopefully, that love us without fear, without judgment. And so today we're going to sing this song and set this intention for you all. If you're wondering why my kids are not in school, they technically are in school. This is part of their homeschool curriculum, being engaged in culture, eating healthy, maintaining healthy relationships. This is how we do what we do in our house. So here we go. Ready? Oh hey, oh hey, 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 oh hi, hey, oh hi, oh hey, oh hey. Hey, hi, oh, hey, hey, oh, hi, hey, oh, hi, ah, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hi, oh, hey, oh, hey, 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 oh, hi. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, hi, oh, hey, hey, oh, hi, hey, oh, hi, hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hi. Oh, hey, oh, hey, 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 oh, hi. Hey, oh, hi. Hey, oh, hey, hey, hi, oh, hey. Hey, oh, hi. Hey, oh, hi. Hey, oh, hey, hey, oh, hi. So in our Navajo way, we say Hojana Asli, Hojana Asli, Hojana Asli, Hojana Asli. Let us walk in beauty throughout this day and every day that we have the opportunity to wake up and put our own 2 feet on the ground. Yeah, thank you all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Yes, thank you, Manny and your family, for starting our morning off right. It's beautiful to see the next generation carrying on our traditions like this. So now we have a tight schedule, and I'd love to move us along to our first presenter for the day. tribally enrolled at the Nambé Pueblo, a sovereign native nation in northern New Mexico. Debbie Reese's research interests include the representations of Native Americans in children's and young adult literature, textbooks, curricular materials, and other forms of media used in the classroom. She'll introduce herself more in her presentation, so take it away, Debbie.
All righty, so I hope that you can see my slides, the title slide. All right. Thank you for the invitation to be here. We're going to talk in my session about supporting Native families. The entire day today is about supporting Native families. And I have a presentation that's kind of a bummer because I'm kind of trying to grow some awareness in the people who are gathered here today to know what it's like to be a Native person in the present day, looking back historically at how we all have been taught about Native people. Basically, this is my assumption. You don't have enough knowledge of Native Americans to adequately support them when they come into your service area. Most people tend to think of us, Native peoples, as culture or cultures, but that reduces us to a very inaccurate status, because the fact is we are sovereign nations, and I think that is really important. So I'm going to talk some about that. So supporting our children includes knowing more about the history. Today in this session, and this is all from the description that went out with the announcement about today's session. Participants are going to learn about historical events that impact Native nations in California and the children and families who are in your programs today. And we're going to conclude with a panel of resource providers who are going to give you guys some information. Some notes. I don't do anything fancy. That's very deliberate. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to provide you with some information. So you won't see any spinning text or any things that move in any way. It's just straight text. Boring to some, but nonetheless, it's content that's important. You're going to see that I use the word nation a lot. That's deliberate. My slides are numbered so that when you're watching today, if you want to make a quick note about a slide number that you want to come back to when we have a Q&A, please do that. For the Q&A, the questions should be held until the end of the presentation. And I see here a bullet that I actually failed to do. Links to sites will be shared in chat. My intention was to share links to sites that would be helpful to you in an email to the hosts so they could push them out during the chat. I did not do that. I apologize. We can return to that later by email, I think. I want to emphasize today that I'm doing two things. I want to talk a little bit about tribal nations in California, but also tribal nations beyond California, because government policies historically have moved Native people around. And also I want to talk about tribal nations beyond California because of choices that we've made as Native people. To start, I want you to take just like 15 seconds. I'm going to start counting in a second here. I want you to write down some names of Native children or non-Native children that are part of your life. I'm going to count to 20. Please do that now. All righty. Now, the reason I do that is because I want everyone to make sure that we all remember that we're not talking about some abstract idea. We're talking about people, children. These are 6 children who are in my immediate family. These are my sisters and my brother's grandchildren. Their names are Olivia, Amelia, Alicia, Ellie, Jaden, and Noah. They are all young children. I want to say Kunta to the first 5 organizers of today's training for inviting me to visit with you all today. And Kunta to everyone who's here in this virtual gathering for choosing to be here. Kunta, I hope you figured out, is not an English word. It's a Tewa word. Tewa is our language at Nambé Pueblo. This use of the word Tewa and the name of my nation are very deliberate. These are tribally specific bits of information. Too much in the United States today, we think Native American, we think American Indian, and when we do that, we tend to fall into a very narrow way of thinking about who the native peoples of this continent were and are. So I'm trying to be tribally specific. I want you to be tribally specific too when you're talking about native peoples. So here's a little map that just kind of tracks my own movement. I was born and raised on the Nambé Reservation. Right there in the center of the picture, you see that Nambé Pueblo governor's office. I was there surrounded on our reservation land, which is about 20,000 acres, but the actual concentration of where we live is much smaller than that. Born and raised there, knowing fully who I am and who we are and what our history is. And then when I wanted to go to graduate school in the 90s to work on a PhD, I left Nambé and moved to Illinois, to Champaign-Urbana, where the University of Illinois is located. There, I went from a place that had, like Nambé has about 600 people living in the immediate Pueblo area and the village area, to a place that had very few. So you see that I have some numbers there about the number of people that were native people that were in Champaign. And then we moved in August from Urbana, Illinois to Redwood City, where I am right now. I'm in Redwood City because my daughter is a faculty member at Stanford Law School. She's the first native hire at Stanford Law School, and she intends to have a family. So we are here to support her in her work, in her life. And that means that the number of native people living in Alameda County has increased by 2. And part of what I'm trying to make the point is that we chose to come here during the historic periods. In the 1950s, for example, the federal government decided one way that they would break up Native nations was to entice Native people to leave their reservations and relocate in a major city. San Francisco was one of those cities. So we have lots of Native people in San Francisco Bay Area because historically, there were Native people in California, but also because of the movements that occur historically through the relocation program, and just because we choose to come here for one reason or another. So we are talking about a large Native population that is in your service area. One of the things that I wanted to help people understand is that idea that we are nations of people, not cultures. Absolutely, we have culture, we have songs, we have dances, we have stories, we have foods, we have clothing and housing that's specific to who we are as Native people. But at the very base, center of all of that is our status as nations. One of the things that you'll hear a lot is that we were nations before the United States was a nation. The United States came after Native nations. When Europeans started coming here, they realized, they recognized, they saw that we were nations of people, that we had leaders. And so when there was a conflict, leaders had to talk with each other, and the outcome of that talk, of that diplomacy, was treaties and other legal agreements. So we are nations of people that were nations before the United States was a nation. Now that idea is a hard one for a lot of people to wrap their mind around, because most of what you got in school, most of what you get in movies and televisions and cartoons, all of that was this idea that Native American peoples were primitive, half naked, running around, chasing buffaloes, more animal-like than human. And that's a misconception that gets in the way of people understanding that we were nations. So I'm trying to push against that idea that we are not just cultures, we are nations of people. It's important and it matters. That concept of sovereignty, and what does that mean actually? And this is a definition from Wilma Mankiller, who was the former principal chief of the Cherokee Nation. She's deceased now, but her definition was, the definition of sovereignty is have control over your own lands and resources and assets, and to have control over your own vision for the future, and to be able to absolutely determine your own destiny. So that's a lot of control over who you are, where you are, what you want to do. That's sovereignty. I'm going to give you an example of how that works, what that control looks like, by using myself as an example. Debbie, I do have a PhD, but I prefer that you call me Debbie. So today you're going to walk away from this session, and I hope you're going to tell others about it. And when you start talking about me and what I'm presenting, I think you'll probably go like, Debbie is tribally enrolled at Nambé Pueblo. That's a fact. I am a citizen of Nambé Pueblo. Whoever you say that to is going to say, what's Nambé Pueblo? What is that? You're going to reply with, well, Nambé Pueblo is one of the sovereign nations commonly called pueblos in what is currently known as New Mexico, because that's where my tribal nation is located, in the lands currently known as New Mexico. We've been sovereign for a long time, and that sovereignty is recognized by 3 canes that our governors have in their homes to the present day, canes that came from Spain and Mexico and Abraham Lincoln, and recognizing that we are sovereign peoples. So sovereignty looks very different, whichever nation you're talking about. That's just a peek at what it's like for the Pueblo nations in what is currently called New Mexico. So when you say the word nations to people, they're all going to go, huh? What are you talking about? Nations? Because of that idea that's widely taught that we are cultures, widely left out the fact that we are nations. So when somebody says nations, what are you talking about? I want you to say to them, yeah, think about it. In school, we learned about treaties, but we didn't really learn that treaties are made between heads of nations who engaged in diplomatic negotiations. And because of those treaties, tribal nations have control. That's the quote from Wilma Mankiller. Tribal nations have control of a lot of things. So the person you're talking to might say, okay, well, what does tribally enrolled mean? And your answer to that will, well, it means that Debbie's a citizen or a tribal member of Nambé. Not because she says so, but because Nambé, as a sovereign nation, controls who its citizens are, and she meets the requirements to be a citizen who can, for example, vote in her tribal elections. If you were to come to Nambé, you'd pass a sign that says that you're entering the Nambé reservation. And that's a state-placed sign. And beyond that, you see the sign that we placed. And the text on that says that you are hereby entering the Pueblo of Nambé and are subject to all tribal and federal laws within our boundaries. Photos and videos are prohibited without permission from the Nambé Pueblo governor's office. All Nambé Pueblo laws are strictly enforced. Now, if you're driving too fast on the reservation, we tell you how fast you can drive because we have that kind of control. We have that kind of power over our tribal lands. This is an example of sovereignty. So we make those decisions. And if you're driving too fast, you get pulled over by the tribal police and you'll go pay your ticket in a tribal offices to the judge who is in our tribal offices at Nambé. We have that as well. And when you're looking at that sign on the right, you're looking at the tribal court. You see the United States flag and you see on the right another flag. That's our flag. We have flags, and the nations across, the native nations across the country have flags. Here's a picture of the National Museum of the American Indian on the left. And once you go inside, hanging throughout the museum are tribal nations flags. These are things I'm pushing very much, again, to help people understand that we are nations of people, that our unique nations do have cultures, songs, stories, dances, etc. But that the key point is that we're nations and we have decision-making powers over what happens with our peoples in our nations. This is my first grade teacher and me that was taken in 1964. I went to the day school at Nambé because Nambé had a day school there. It was part of the federal educational system for Native peoples. It was about boarding schools. I'm going to say a little bit more about that later. But when I grew up, I read and loved the 5 Chinese brothers. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is that it wasn't until I was 32 years old that I was asked to reconsider the depictions of Chinese people in the 5 Chinese brothers. This is racist. This is stereotypical. This is hugely problematic. This book shaped what I knew about Chinese people. So I let it go. And so in my presentations, when I talk about children's books, I often use a red X to communicate visually the idea that this is something that I have let go of. I no longer recommend or talk or think that this is a good book because it's not. I share this because we are all miseducated in some way or another. I'm going to be talking about that miseducation today because it's crucial, very important for people to understand that to begin their commitment and journey to supporting Native families, you have to start by looking critically at the images they and you are inundated with. And remember that these images negatively impact all of us. Like the 5 Chinese brothers negatively impacted me when I went to graduate school in Illinois and started to actually interact with Asian people. Asian Americans, I asked the most goofy and racist questions. I understood that that goes back to what I was given by society and by schools and by educational materials about who the Chinese people are. I learned a lot, and I have been humiliated and embarrassed, but I listen and move on. I want to start here quickly by looking at what Google tells us about Native peoples. If you do a Google image search using the word Native Americans, you're going to get this. See that? Lots of black and white, lots of feathers, lots of historical images. When you do a search using American Indians, you get the same thing, feathers, black and white, set in the past. When you do that same search for African Americans, you see African American people of the present day. You see one there on the top left that's from a long time ago, but mostly what you see is African American peoples of the present day. Same thing for Asian Americans and Latino Americans. For most of the underrepresented populations in the United States, we get lots of information that centers or places them in the present day. That is not the case with Native people. So what I want people to do is to think critically and ask questions about histories and stories and images and who, what is included, who, what is left out, who writes these histories and these stories, and how do those histories and stories about history impact life? How does history and stories about history impact Native families in your service area? Part of what we said that you would get from today is the opportunity to look critically at some moments in history that negatively impact Native people. So we're going to talk in depth, briefly, in the hour that we have together, a little bit about missions and gold rush and boarding schools. But we could also talk about Columbus Day and Thanksgiving, because these are all pieces of history that impact life today, the life of you who are not Native and the life of those of us who are Native. These are having a derogatory impact on our lives today because they situate us in the past, they situate us as primitive, uncivilized people, and all of that is incorrect. I recommend that people take a look at On Indian Ground. This book is edited by Jolie Proudfit and Nicole Myers-Lim, packed with really good information that you can use to understand more about who we are. In chapter 1, Laura Cooper writes, perhaps the most comprehensive contact with non-Indigenous peoples began in Southern California in 1769 when the Franciscan missions were established, and in Northern California upon the discovery of gold. So here she's talking about two of the historical moments that we're going to look at today. If you do a search on California missions, you're going to find this is the first Google page that comes up, the one about the California missions, and their subtitle there's Keeping the Past Present. When I click through on that to look at the mission San Diego de Alcala, I see that idea about keeping the past present, continuing with this idea that the missions were a good, is very much a part of how missions are presented today. I think it would be more accurate to say the motto is continuing to misinform visitors, because that's exactly what happens. And it's especially problematic when we look at the pages about school reports. If you open that up and look at that, you see that it has the same kind of derogatory, primitive information about who the California Native peoples were. It's misrepresentation that hurts Native kids and it hurts non-Native kids because it contributes to their miseducation about who the Native peoples of California people were and are. You get that too in books like Song of the Swallows. My work is primarily in children's literature, so you'll see many references to children's books in my presentation today. Most of you are adults. Most of you probably read Song of the Swallows because that's one of the books that gets taught in schools quite a lot because it won a medal. You see the medal down there on the bottom right of the cover. But when you think critically about the information that's in there, and that's at the mission websites that people see when they go to the missions, you see things like, long ago, the good brothers of St. Francis came to this country from across the sea. Father Junipero Serra and the brothers walked along the wild trail through the wilderness, and with the help of the Indians, they built many mission churches. The missions were like little villages. There, the Indians learned to make shoes and harnesses, blankets and hats, tools and pottery, many of the things they needed in their daily life. Now, what I would like people to realize as they're reading that is like, golly, those poor Indians, what kind of life did they lead? They didn't know how to do anything. They really needed this mission people, the Franciscans, to come and help them. That's just not true. They were surviving on the land for thousands of years. There was no need for Christian missionaries to come and teach them how to cook. We knew how to do that, whether you're talking about native peoples in New Mexico or in California. We had surviving, thriving communities for thousands of years, but it gets presented in this way at the missions and in children's books about the missions. So here is my red X. That's no longer a book that I think anybody should be using. And to my delight, in February of this year, the California Department of Education decided that book will no longer be on their recommended literature list. It has been, but this is a sign of powerful entities like the California Department of Education saying, you know what, we don't need that book anymore. Teachers should not be using that book anymore. We're not going to include it on our recommended literature list anymore. So it's not there. That's a sign of progress. Unfortunately, in February of this year, I found this image of this photograph of a teacher's presentation about the missions, because in schools across the country, kids are asked to do these mission activities. We need that to come to an end. That needs to stop because it's teaching misinformation about that period of history and the impact of the missions on Native people. This is an article by Nicole Myers-Lim, Educating Elementary School Children About California Missions and the Perpetuation of Genocide. You can do a Google search on that. We could come back to that later if you'd like, but basically this idea that California Indians happily accepted mission life is just not true. Native peoples in California fought back. They burned the missions. They organized attacks because they were not happily living in the missions. That's a misrepresentation that we really need to push back against. This book, Bad Indians by Deborah Miranda, is one that I would recommend because she includes information in her book about the things that were going on in the missions, like floggings, records that show that Padres and the Crown limit the number of blows that would be delivered. This is detail that we need to have more known so that we stop what's happening in the instruction about missions that takes place at the mission schools, at the missions themselves. Native people have been working very hard to push back on that, and this is a page from one of the websites that you can use to learn more about that, about the missions. Gold Rush is another one that we need to be paying a lot of attention to, because in the United States, we celebrate the Gold Rush. That was a cool thing. You see this guy here. There's a photograph here on this page. This is from the California Department of Parks and Recreation. It's a website about the Gold Rush, and has this guy hold his hands holding this little pie tin and dipping into the water to find gold. That's kind of how we think that the gold rush happened, that people just wanted to get rich, and they came to California with their little pie tins and their donkeys, and they were panning for gold in the rivers. That did happen for just about this much of the time. The actual history of the gold rush is much darker than that. Of course, what was going on with Native people, this is part of that. What gets taught in textbooks is wrong. It misrepresents what was happening to Native people during the gold rush, but you don't find that in the textbooks, what was happening. A little bit about that you can find in Cliff Craftsworth's edited book called Exterminate Them: Written Accounts of the Murder, Rape, and Enslavement of Native Americans During the Gold Rush. That is the kind of information that we need to have so we can stop celebrating the gold rush. We have moved to a point in the United States where we're starting to think more critically about slavery and the life of enslaved peoples. We need to get there too with the life of Native peoples in California whose lands were overrun by the gold miners. This book has really good historical information. It cites Native people who've been writing about California Indians for decades. Here's from the foreword by Edward Castillo, who is Cahuilla. He writes, as the 150th anniversary of the California gold discovery approached, I, along with many other California Indians, struggled with my conscience how I might participate in this sesquissential in an honest and dignified manner. To ignore it would be to surrender to those who would trivialize the violent annihilation of something like half of our surviving population. For those interested in only the bottom line, 100,000 California Indians died in the first 2 years of the gold rush. Not much here to celebrate, he says. So part of what I'm pushing again is think carefully about the gold rush and its impact on Native people, on Native families, on Native nations, and how that comes forward today. So you may have Native families who know this history, who share this history with their kids, that the gold rush was not a good thing. That's the kind of awareness that I want people who are providing services to Native people to have in their own heads and hearts. We have a whole new set of children's books about the Oregon Trail coming out. It includes the gold rush. Here you see that little miner there with, this one's playing violin, but he's got a little pan that he's going to use to, you see that at his feet where he's going to pull gold out of the river. That's again a misrepresentation of what happened during the gold rush. This book celebrates the gold rush, and it's one that I do not recommend. We could come back and talk more about that. Here is a nonfiction book called Struck Gold. The cast of characters is people who are excited and happy to be part of the gold rush. When you look at the timeline at the back of the book, it starts at 1848. It's like, what happened? What about Native people who were here before that? Why is that not part of it? It's just not convenient. It just interrupts the feel-good story about the gold rush. And so that's not included. Native people and life as impacted by the gold rush and the miners, not included. It's inconvenient. So thinking carefully about that and the people who were part of the gold rush. We all know, most of you probably are wearing a pair of Levi's today. I certainly am. But who was the man who created Levi's? That man, Levi Strauss. And looky here, this book about him is about mining. And you see the miners behind him. He's a person that was important to the development of the gold rush. He came up with these genes, and this story is about him. Does not include any information about the impact of the gold rush on Native people. Again, it's celebrating the gold rush at the cost of life that Native people were experiencing during that time. So again, no, we're not going to celebrate him. Moving here to the boarding school, I was really surprised. My parents went to boarding school. I have lots of family members that went to boarding school. What happened at the boarding schools was a known thing. When I moved to Illinois and started talking about a boarding school book that came out, people were like, but boarding schools are a good thing. And I realized how badly informed most Americans are about the boarding schools. Most people think that is a good place, like a prestigious boarding school in Massachusetts. In fact, this was another government policy that was meant to get rid of Native peoples, to kill the Indian and save the man, was one of the mottos that's associated with that. Some of you might be aware that in May of this year, of 2021, the media was starting to report on mass graves of Indigenous children in Canada. And people were starting to learn about that in Canada. A lot of people were not aware of that, and people in the United States were certainly not aware of it. And then when the United States government Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, announced a new initiative that we are going to look at boarding schools, grave sites in the United States, people were like, what? They had no idea that there are boarding schools in the United States. The masses of Americans have so much that we don't know because we weren't taught about it. In fact, there were American Indian boarding schools in most states of the nation. This graphic shows some of those. Included here is California, because there were, at the time this graphic was made, because this research is ongoing, a lot of the schools that were set up were not that widely known or documented. And so researchers are trying to generate lists of all of them so that they can do this research. In California, at the time of this graphic, there were 10 schools listed. So the schools were everywhere. Many of them had very harmful impacts on Native people. This is the book that I was talking about earlier when I said that I moved to Illinois and started having conversations with people about boarding schools, and this book had come out and people thought boarding schools were great. And I said, no, this is terrible. This is a whitewashing of what actually happened at the boarding schools. This was published by Scholastic. It's in one of their most best-selling series of books. It's the Dear America series. This is a dreadful book. Nobody should be using that. Of course, there are Native responses and Native resources that you can turn to about the boarding schools. This is one of them. But the big point that we want to make, that I want to make, that the people that you're going to hear from shortly, is the fact that we are still here. We persist in spite of all that has been done to eradicate, to erase, to destroy us. We are still here. And so part of what I want to wind down with is that we are in California, we are in the Bay Area. So Alcatraz is a piece of what we know. So if you go to Alcatraz, if you take one of the trips over to Alcatraz, you're going to learn about Al Capone and the fact that it was a federal prison. What you don't generally learn about is the fact that Native people have a strong presence at Alcatraz. It goes way back to the boarding school period when Alcatraz was the place that Hopi fathers, Hopi is one of the tribal nations in Arizona, Hopi fathers were incarcerated there because they would not turn their kids over to the federal agents who were coming to take their kids to put them in boarding schools. Hopi families said no, and they were incarcerated at Alcatraz for saying no. But if you zoom up to 1964, Alcatraz was the site of really intense Native activism. This is a photo of Belva Corrier. She was in the Sioux Club at the Indian Friendship Center in San Francisco. She read a newspaper article about the federal government closing Alcatraz, and she and others knew about the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie that said abandoned federal property could revert to tribal ownership. So on March 8th, a group of Native people who were in San Francisco area because of that relocation program that started in the 50s, this group went to Alcatraz and they drove stakes into the ground in the same way that Lewis and Clark had been driving stakes into the ground to claim lands. And they filed a legal claim to get the island back using that 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie. So that is something that's right here. It's very much a part of the Bay Area history that isn't taught enough either. The tours that take place at Alcatraz really need to be revamped, and that the presence of Native people at Alcatraz has to be something that's featured alongside what is currently there. In November of 1969 through 1971, a group called the Indians of All Tribes continued with the occupation of Alcatraz, and here are some photographs from that occupation. And that last photograph is one of the photos of the commemorations, the gatherings that continue to happen at Alcatraz to mark what was going on in the 60s at Alcatraz. Making the point, we're still here, we're still speaking up, we still want people to know. We think it's vitally important that people know about who we are. Remember, service providers don't have enough knowledge. What we're trying to do with our session today, what I was trying to do with my session today, is just give you a peek at some of it. It's really a bummer for me as a Native person to go over that history, but it is vitally important that we know that, and that we as service providers know that Native people's experience of these moments in American or US history are not the same as those of non-Native people. We have a longer history, we have a darker history, we have a strong sense of persistence, of survival, and we are still here. So that's what I was trying to do today, was give you a peek at the fact that Native people have different histories, different stories, different experiences from what mainstream America is giving most of Americans about certain moments in history. The last line here is that the session will include a panel of community resource providers who will share information about their agencies and resources for Native American families. And that's what we'll be doing next with Karina Gould. She's going to she'll be the first panelist, I think, to talk about resources that are available to you. That's my last slide. I'm going to stop my screen share. And I think we have time now for some questions and comments. And I think that Lee or Angelina is going to monitor that.
Yes, any questions for Debbie?
You're welcome to type those into the chat, or if you'd like to unmute your mic and ask your question, you can do that as well.
I do see one question here that says, what was the name of the book on slide 39?
Oh gosh. Okay. Let me pull up my presentation again.
Mhm.
I'm not going to share it again because that makes things very complicated. I'm going to open it on my computer. And what number was it again?
I believe it was 39.
Okay. That is a booklet, American Indian Boarding Schools, an exploration of global ethnic and cultural cleansing. If we were to put that title in Google Chat, we would be able to find it. Let me see if I can do that real quick. I was talking very fast because I wasn't sure that I would have enough time to get through all my slides. This is a new presentation for me. So I apologize that I was speaking so fast. I'm looking for that
Right. Well,
document.
looking for that, I see a hand up. Valerie.
Debbie, thank you for your wonderful presentation. Do you know at this point who, or if you could explain how, we're working with the state of California to change the book resources list to have more applicable Native American books included and those that are inappropriate removed?
I'm not going to be able to keep looking for that link, Angelina. I hope that someone else in the session could try and find it and then put that link in there. Valerie, your question was about trying to change the books that are being used in schools. Speaking up is crucial. That is one thing that everyone here can do. I don't know that, in fact, the Song of the Swallows came out because of my vocal opposition to that book over time. But that list there used to have over 8,000 books on it. It included Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is also another hugely problematic book. That's not there anymore either. And I discovered that it wasn't there anymore about a month ago when I was doing another presentation. And I usually check back to make sure that what I'm doing is up to date. And I went to the California website again to look up both Island of the Blue Dolphins and Song of the Swallows, and neither one was there. It's a searchable database. That literature list is a searchable database. And so I had gone back to search for those again, and neither one was there. And I thought, what happened? I must have messed up my search. I started digging into the website, and I found out that they had decided that the 8,000 books that they had on that list were not appropriate. Who is they? I don't know. How did they make those decisions? I actually don't know, but I think they're paying attention to voices of people from populations that have been denigrated or marginalized historically, because that list now has about 800 books on it, and it includes some excellent books by Native writers. I was so excited to see that Island of the Blue Dolphins wasn't there, and that Song of the Swallows wasn't there. Little House on the Prairie is not there. One book after another that misrepresents history, that has tremendous bias, is gone from that list. And that can only happen when people are speaking up. So I think one of the things that all of the people who are here today can do is speak up. Use social media, because people are paying attention. They might not ever reply to you, but change is happening. People are understanding. And it's only because people are speaking up. I can give two examples of when speaking up has made a difference historically, in addition to the ones about the California recommended literature list. Some of you may remember there was a book called Little Black Sambo that people really liked, and enough people started saying, you know, that book is racist. Enough people spoke up about it that it's not commonly used in schools anymore. It's even hard to find a copy of it in a library. Some libraries have it in a research area, but not on the open shelves. So we understood, we came to understand that book was racist, and we let it go. As a society, we have let go of Little Black Sambo. We have also seen really huge changes in Richard Scarry books. Some of you know Richard Scarry does all those word books and real cartoonish kind of books, but they're very popular. Many of his books had derogatory images of Native people in them that are gone. A lot of his books had very genderized, very sexualized images about men and women. Those are gone. Those are changed. So updates happen because people speak up. People are saying, hey, that's not okay. So I encourage people to do that. If you see that book being used in your schools or in your child's classroom, I invite people to write to me, because I'm a person who speaks up, and I will use every bit of energy I have to draw attention to the fact that the book is still being used.
Thank you, Dr. Reese.
All right, I saw another question pop up. Can you name a few positive books? What is your opinion of the Education of Little Tree?
No to Education of Little Tree. The man who wrote Education of Little Tree pretended to be Cherokee. He was not Cherokee. He was actually a speechwriter for George Wallace. Most of you know that idea that that slogan was segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That slogan came from the man who wrote The Education of Little Tree. That man's actual name was Asa Carter. The author attributed to Education of Little Tree was Forrest Carter. Forrest Carter was actually Asa Carter, a man who was pretending to be Cherokee. So the Cherokee Nation and many Cherokee scholars have written about that book and the problems you find in that book. So no, I do not recommend that, and for many reasons. The information is bad, but the person who wrote it was pretending to be something he was not. And yes, can I recommend some? Yeah, next week I'm doing a session about choosing better books. One came out just 2 weeks ago. I wish I had it. I wish I had a hard copy of it. I don't. I have a Kindle copy of it, but the book is called Forever Cousins, and it's about two little girls. The author is Laurel Goodluck. And the illustrator is Jonathan Nelson. And if you go to my website, it's one of the things that I have on there right now. Forever Cousins, about two little girls growing up in the Bay Area. They are cousins. They are here because of that relocation program in the 50s, and they hang out together. They go to powwows together. They like sunflowers. So in the first pages of this really delightful picture book, you see these two little girls living their lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. One of them's families has decided they're going to go back to the reservation. So the two girls are very sad because one family is leaving the community to go back to the reservation. And so you see a page where the two little girls are at powwows, and they're both sad because their buddy's not there anymore. Their forever cousin is not there with them at that powwow anymore. On one, you see the background is skyscrapers, and on the other, you see it's hills. So you clearly get the idea that the two little girls are in different places now. And they get back together by the end of the book because there's going to be a reunion, and they're coming back together at the end of the book. But in that book, the author's note, the author's note is very long. That is a plus for any teacher who's using a book, because it provides you with information you need to help kids understand what's going on in the book. That's the information that you were not taught in schools. You would be hard pressed to find any materials that taught you about the relocation program of the 50s, when Native people were moved from their homelands into urban areas so that they could have jobs and work in these urban areas. But that information is in Forever Cousins. It's right there in the author's note. The author's family was here because of the relocation program. So she provides information that helps you understand how this area, the Bay Area, came to be one of the places where there's a large Native community. So anyway, next week I'm doing a session that will talk about problematic books, but also going to be loaded with really good books that you should use in your classrooms.
Wonderful. Leah, I don't know if you want to stick that registration link into the chat. That would be awesome.
Oh, yep, it's there.
Okay.
And for anyone who attends the session next week, we'll be sending them a free copy of Forever Cousins.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm just so psyched.
Yes, so please sign up and come next week. And then, okay, we have one more question that says, do you have any specific suggestions of how to support Native families feel more comfortable in our current education settings?
Yeah, I think that when there's this idea that people can indigenize their classroom or indigenize their library, indigenize their office. So you have Native families coming into your offices or your libraries or your classrooms, into the spaces that you have. I don't want to see any Thanksgiving posters there. I don't want to see any Columbus posters there. I want to see photos that show Native people of the present day. It would be great to have books like Forever Cousins on your shelf right there. So when people come into your office for a meeting, for whatever reason, they can see that book and pick up that book and hold that book and read that book. Here I have Still This Love Goes On by Buffy St. Marie and Julie Flett. That's a new book too that just came out. You should have these books in all of your spaces, ones that are by Native writers, that show Native kids, that feature Native families. These can do so much to push against the problems that Native families are going through right now. Every time you go to the grocery store, every time you go to the library, to the video store, there are depictions of Native people that are stereotypical and racist and set in the past. You as service providers have a huge body of image that you have to push against so that you affirm the experience and lives of the Native people in your service areas. So the way I advocate doing that is using storytelling, using books by Native writers.
Great, thank you. Any last questions before we take a 3-minute break? Okay, thank you, Debbie. That was wonderful. I'm gonna let everyone feel free to shut off your cameras for 3 minutes, run to the bathroom, grab some water, refill your coffee, and we'll be back on like at 11:02 to get started on the next part. Thanks. Great, so now for the next portion of our presentation, we're going to move on to our panelists. We've got a panel of a few representatives from agencies serving Native American families in Alameda County. And I'm going to name our 3 wonderful panelists now, and then we'll move to have them each present and do a short presentation of their agency and themselves. And then at the end, we'll open it up for questions. So our first presenter will be Karina Gold as the chair and spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of Lisjan. Then we'll have Julia Salgado from the Native American Health Center. And then we'll have Andrew Demirs from the American Indian Child Resource Center. And so we're going to start off with Karina, if you're ready, Karina. Wonderful.
Great, thank you so much. Horshe Tuhi Ka'atla Shanka Ka'atra'at Karina. My name is Karina Gould. I am the tribal chair for the Confederated Villages of Lisjan Nation. I'm also the co-founder and co-director of the Segorite Land Trust, the first urban indigenous women-led land trust in the country. And I'm going to talk to you about some resiliency. And I just want to thank Dr. Reese for the wonderful presentation to give some historical context to some of the things that we've been dealing with. So I was born and raised in the East Bay, my traditional homelands, the traditional homelands of the Confederated Villages of Lisjan. We are a confederation of Ohlone, Bay Miwok, Plains Miwok, Delta Yokut, and Patwin. And the reason that we are reorganized into a confederation is because we were enslaved at Mission Dolores in San Francisco and Mission San Jose in Fremont, California. The mountain that you see behind me is not just a beautiful scenery. It is called Tuyushtak. And Tuyushtak is our creation space. It is a place that we were created from. It is the mountain of our creation story. And it is a place that is now known to you all as Mount Diablo. It went from a place of creation to a devil mountain through the colonization of our territories. And quickly through the territories that we are in, we actually encompass 5 Bay Area counties. And so we are in Alameda, Contra Costa, San Joaquin, Solano, and parts of Napa. And so our territories are quite vast. I am here today in the territory of Huchun, a place that encompasses many cities in the county of Alameda. So Huchun encompasses Oakland, Alameda, Berkeley, Emeryville, Albany, and Piedmont. And so our territories were huge. The language Chochenyo that I spoke to you in was the first language of the East Bay. My great-grandfather, Jose Guzman, was one of the last speakers of the language. The language has been asleep for almost 100 years, and my daughter Deja Gould is the language carrier for our tribe and is re-engaging the tribe in language and culture. And so we're doing a lot, but we are also invisible in our territory because we are not a federally recognized tribe. Of the 21 missions that were created in the state of California, along the coast of California, there are virtually no federally recognized tribes in those areas. So from San Diego to Solano, most of the tribes that are along the bays and the waterways are not federally recognized. And so does it mean that we cease to exist? No. It means that we just do not have the same relationship with the federal government as federally recognized tribes. And so, but I work with young people. Manny, who started us off with his daughters today, I worked with him at the American Indian Child Resource Center. I was the Title VII coordinator for Office of Indian Ed. Manny now has my position. It's changed over to Title IX. And I think that is a huge resource for people that are working with the Native community, that these folks that are working in the school districts really do the connection of young people in our Native community, especially when they find themselves outside of their home or their tribal places. And so I'm going to share a slideshow with you, and it really is pictures because I hate being a talking head like I'm being right now. And I want to talk about the resiliency of our young people, because I think that our young people are strong. Dr. Reese talked about the idea of this relocations thing that happened during the 50s and 60s. And I talk about this relocation process as also a process of assimilation, right? It was a means of getting Native people off the reservations and into cities with the hopes that they would assimilate and disappear among the other populations. That has not happened, and it has actually created a very strong community in our urban areas. And so the Bay Area was one of the largest populations of American Indians outside of Navajo country for many years. And we still have many thousands of Native people that look just like everyone else. And so the idea of Native people looking like me or like Angelina or Manny or Dr. Reese is not always the same. Some of our children they look like they may be African American, or they may have blonde hair or blue eyes. And so our children are not what you may imagine in your own mind. There's historical trauma that impacts us still today, which results in high rates of alcoholism and addiction, post-traumatic stress disorder or post-colonial stress disorder, depression, anxiety. Native American young people have the highest rate of suicide in our reservations. We have abuse of all forms, physical, sexual, domestic violence. There was a breakdown of our family systems that started through the boarding school syndrome. And so when you are taken away from your family homes and teachings when you're as young as 5 years old, you don't know what it's like to be in a family or to retake care of each other in that same kind of way. There was a loss of culture and language and spirituality in many cases. So this is what historical trauma is. It's not in the past, though. It's something that we live with today. As Native people, we have not only these problems, but then we have what I call, and as I look at my own body, a colonial body, a body that holds inflammation because of the high orders of anxiety and depression and things that we hold in our body. And I like this next slide because it actually talks to that, right? It talks to historical trauma. When we look at this picture, and Dr. Reese talked about boarding schools and thousands of students going to these places that were run by the military to begin with, as a way of getting rid of the identity of Native people. It says historical trauma is entirely different than consciously holding on to the past when it resides in your ancestral memory and DNA. It results in numerous defense mechanisms, developmental malfunctions, and behavioral issues. And this is scientific and is supported in studies. that these ideas of being taken away from your culture and language and ways of being, the ways that we had been for thousands and thousands of years, has an effect today on how we maneuver throughout the world. It's a way of being lost. When I look at our own tribal people, I look at how it's affected us to be separated from our land. Even though I grew up in my own territory, in my own homelands, my entire life, there's a separation because we have no connection to our lands in the same way that other people may have those connections on reservations or places like that. We, for the last few hundred years, have found ourselves homeless in our own homelands, not having a place to go, having to ask permission from park districts to go and pray or to gather our traditional foods and medicines, not having that connection until we started the land trust. The land trust started in about 2014 when we began to find that a connection to our sacred sites and our land bases and our medicines and waters was that it was imperative to do that to save the next generations. And not just our tribal people, but all tribal people that now live in our territories have the opportunity to come and to pray without outside interference. And that's what we call rematriation, about coming back to our belief systems, coming back to the center of who we are as Indigenous people. Our young people are resilient and they want to be a part of something. Then the urban areas, they know that they are part of a larger urban Indigenous community where we are able to, in some places, pray together or to gather in ceremony. These young people are from Standing Rock. And when Standing Rock happened in 2016, young people found their resiliency and self-pride again, were able to feel like they can leave drugs and alcohol behind. Their suicide rates plummeted around young people during this time because there was a meaning. You had meaning in your life again, that there was a part of something that you could belong to, and that this was coming back to ceremony, hearing the songs, listening to elders, being a part of a movement that was actually going to take us beyond ourselves, standing up for something that was higher than us, our waters, the things that hold us all together. And these young people did that work alongside their elders and other young people and adults. Young people are doing similar things that our ancestors did for thousands of years. Our ancestors ran for miles and miles to bring messages to other tribes or to village sites. And our young people today run as a part of their resiliency, as a part of bringing messages. These young people ran all the way from their reservation to Washington, D.C. to bring the message about protecting water. And so for hundreds and thousands of miles, our young people run with us today, a run of resiliency, of health, of your mind, body, and spirit. And so these are traditional practices of our people, is to do these runs and walks alongside of our ancestors, alongside of our elders, alongside of our adult mentors. And young people in the Bay Area have been able to stand and learn about their traditions in different ways. When I was working at the American Indian Child Resource Center, I used a program called Daughters of Tradition, where we brought young people together to talk about bringing in our cultural values, even in an urban setting. How do we begin to think about ourselves as Indigenous women? What is our right roles and responsibilities? How do we uphold our traditions, even though we're in this urban setting where all of these other things around? And it brought about a resiliency in these young women that they were able to pass that on to other young people, but also to stand up against things that you find are offensive to you. And this mascot issue that's still in many of our schools across the country still see Native people as mascots, as caricatures, as people that are not people at all. And so young people standing up to raise their voices, to stand in who they are, to find a community together, to be, to voice their concerns about these things, to say that we are still here, actually helps young people to build all of those strengths that they need in order to survive. We take pride in dancing. And in the Bay Area, there's beautiful pictures of young people in powwows. And not everybody are powwow people. We have California Native people that still do their ceremonial dances and bring those dances to the places like Intertribal Friendship House, and really try to find ways to re-engage in these medicine dances that are strong and resilient, to hear those songs that are sometimes thousands of years old, to bring our young people to these places where they can see themselves, they can actualize that, they can dance. And then for many tribes, dancing is a form of prayer. That we use our entire body in order to send those prayers to the earth and to our creator. And so this is actually doing that, giving young people a way to see themselves in their formal regalia, to just be able to see other young people that look like themselves, and to laugh and have jokes and familiarity. And so it's this pride of young people coming together to learn those songs and dances again, and becoming our song carriers. And we hear about the big drums that are at the powwows, and our relatives from the middle of the country that use these big drums. We also see our Yupik people up here that are using different kinds of drums with seal skin. We have clapper sticks in California that we use. So there are many different kinds of songs and carriers. And so we're not all the same. And our young people are not all the same. And so we can't just imagine them being in this generic Native place, this Native American place that Dr. Reese had spoke to, is that there are so many cultures. Over 528 federally recognized tribes, and hundreds of other tribes that are not federally recognized. Each have their own language and culture, each have their own songs, and their own places that they were born to. Our community connections are important, to take our young people, to see them as themselves, to take them out swimming, and to see themselves in places like hip hop, and to understand that it's not just these traditions in the past, but these traditions today, to watch stories on that look like themselves, like Res Dogs and Rutherford Falls, and to be able to see Native community and laughter, and to be able to see all of that and enjoy that as well. And to bring back traditions while having fun. As a young man that's there in the dances, a hoop dancer, and to learn about those and where those come from, and to reimagine yourself with hula hoops in your driveway, learning how to play, how to do these things, to learn about lacrosse, and how this was an indigenous game that people played, and was taken from us, and now is used in a lot of places around the world. But it started as an indigenous game that actually helped people to stop wars from becoming. To participate in things that are ceremony, that are run for salmon, that has happened for 7 years, is a way for us to be in prayer together with many different tribes throughout California that are standing for our salmons and our waterways. A place for young people to reimagine themselves as their ancestors had in carrying this message, to realize that their prayers are connected to the prayers of people, but are also connected to the prayers of our ancestors and our relatives, the salmon, and that their life, our lives are dependent on their lives being healthy. And so learning the interconnection between our bodies and our waters, our lands, and having those connections together and bringing them along. And the reason I said this one is because we see these little people, and they're at these protests, or that they're at these places of sacred sites that we're standing up. But it's important that young people understand that there are many different ways to be Native, that there are many different ways for them to be a part of something, that to stand up for something that is bigger than us and that is older than us, that they learn from watching. We all know that children learn from watching their adults. And if they're watching them do these good things of standing up for something that is traditionally their way of being in this world, that they also learn to stand up as well, that they know that their voice matters, and that that's important in growing a resiliency. Encouraging young people to go to school and to have their traditions as well. And so this young woman that's graduating from college, she's wearing her eagle feathers. That shows that both that she is proud of who she is as a scholar, but also proud of who her indigenous heritage is. And to ensure that that's happened, it saddens me over the, in recent years, in the last few years, that students have been told in high school that they can't have their cap beaded or they can't wear their feathers. That it's important as adults that we stand with them to be able to do those things, to stand against the continued racism that happens to Native students. And so it's important that we do this work together with them. The healing in all aspects of our humanity, right? That we look at the whole person, that we look at everybody's spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical being, that when we are out of sync in any of these places, things go awry, but that we know that we can come back to this circle. This is a part of our indigenous teaching, our epistemology as indigenous people, that we are connected to all things, that all things are alive and have a spirit, and that it's important that our young people have this teaching, that there are all of these different parts of them, and that they are not wrong if something goes awry, but that we can bring them back into this circle of healing again. To have sure that there's intergenerational protection of sacred sites, that our young people know where our sacred sites are. And it's important. I say that because I grew up in the Bay Area. And so our sacred sites are covered up and people wouldn't know them. In the Bay Area, we walked these sacred sites that were all over the Bay Area called our shell mounds, that are now under parking lots and malls and bars and buildings. But it's important for us to know where these sacred sites are so that we are connected to our ancestors and our traditional life and values. And so people come from all walks of life to help us to stand inside of these circles to protect our sacred sites. And this West Berkeley Shell Mound in the Bay Area is one of the oldest ones that looks like a parking lot. But as you can see in this picture, we have hundreds of people from all different walks of life, old and young, that understand the history and the resiliency and the need to protect these sites for everyone. Continue to stand together, to grow our hope and our faith together, remembering our ancestors, going to ceremony. And I think that this is important, especially for young people that may be taken outside of their family homes, that if there's a way for them to go to ceremony, if there's a way for them to participate in their traditional belief systems, it's a way to reconnect to us as Indigenous people, that it's important for young people to go to ceremony, to understand who they are, to remember that they have a place, and that they are brought back into that circle. To remember to learn our languages, that there's not one languages, that there's thousands of languages, and that everyone should learn a few words of their language if they can. It helps them to build their own self-esteem, to know that they have something, and to remember our connection to the land, that young people need to be outside and away from their game systems as much as possible, away from our phones, away for us to just be on the land, to remember that she holds us together and that we are a part of it, not apart from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karina. That was wonderful. I am sure you all may have some questions, but we'll hold the questions till the end of the panel, and we'll move on now to Julia Salgado from the Native American Health Center. If she's there.
Hi, is this one?
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Lynn. My name is Juliet, and I just wanted to share a little bit of my bio. And my name is Juliet, and I am from the Bay Area. I've been with Native American Health Center for about 7 years now. During my time here at Native American Health Center, I have held different roles. I started as a medical assistant and worked my way to become a comprehensive perinatal health worker for the OB department. And I recently became the medical assistant supervisor. In my current role, I perform comprehensive perinatal service program assessments for our active OB patients, as well as directly supervise the medical assistants in our Oakland clinic. At present, we do have 14 medical assistants. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Okay, so here at Native American Health Center, we do have a mission statement. So Native American Health Center's mission statement is to provide comprehensive services and to improve the health and well-being of American Indians, Alaska Natives, and the residents of our surrounding communities. Obviously with the respect for culture and linguistic differences. We are right now currently celebrating our Native American Heritage Month. November is Native American Heritage Month. Native American Health Center does play a very special role in the community, ensuring that the voices of our Native members are heard and honored. As well as we look at wellness and holistic care when serving everyone. NHC has sought to protect the health and well-being of the community members and will continue to do that for the next 7 generations. Okay, the Native American Health Center is also mission-driven for community health with a long history of providing integrated healthcare. Next slide. Who we are. We are a community health center for everyone. And our health center does include medical, dental, behavioral health, community wellness, the WIC department, and school-based health centers. So our clinic also has school-based health centers where in the Oakland Unified School District schools. Not all of them, but we are in a majority of them. We have an estimated amount of 300 employees. Our main site clinic here is in Oakland. We have a sister clinic in San Francisco, school-based health center sites in San Leandro, Alameda, and then we also have a site in Richmond, but they don't do any direct patient care. And we've been serving the community since 1972, and we are currently celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. Yeah. Okay, you can skip it. Okay. We have a lot of services for youth. Our services for the youth do include for our medical services, we have services for pediatrics, the CPSP program, which is the program that I run, which is the comprehensive perinatal service program for OB patients. WIC, which does include nutrition counseling and breastfeeding peer counseling, well child check visits, and we also do incentives for our well child checks. We'll give, if they're of school age, we'll give backpack and school supplies. We do have a whole pediatric dental clinic. And our community wellness department includes Strong Families Home Visiting program for our Native patients. We held community events like seasonal gatherings. We do backpack giveaways. And we also have a whole behavioral health department. And we have one person right now on staff that's doing all of our pediatric care coordination. Other support for members, just in general, we do have language interpretations. We have this via video or via phone. We have food resources and support. We also do incentives like gift cards for some preventative care measures like cancer screenings and our well child checks. We have a care coordination and warm handoffs. So that's really nice because during our patient care on the floor, if there's a patient that's actively in some sort of mental health crisis, we have people on staff to attend to them at that moment. And we also hold Saturday clinics, the second and fourth Saturdays of every month to accommodate, those patients who work Monday to Friday and their only availability to come in is on a Saturday. I have attached some events that we are going to be having. Like I said, it's November is Native Heritage Month, so we're going to have a celebration. And also we're going to be holding Indigenous Red Market. The Indigenous Red Market is a really fun event. And those both flyers are here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that overview of Native American Health Center. Next, we'll move on to Andrew. Let me see, are you there, Andrew Demers? Oh, there you are. Wonderful.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to all the presenters and thank you to First Five for having us. So my name is Andrew Demers and I am the counseling manager at the American Indian Child Resource Center. Let me just share my screen. Show. Okay, so this is the logo for the American Indian Child Resource Center, which was founded in 1974 and is located here in Oakland. Our website is aicrc.org, so you can look at the website. It kind of details all of our services and our staff members. So our mission statement is to preserve and promote the integrity and culture of American Indian youth and their families. So we serve Indigenous youth and their families. And this is a list of our programs. We primarily have 3 departments. We're a small nonprofit agency. Most of our funding is grant-based or donation. So the 3 main departments that we have are the Indian Education Center, which has an after-school program for grades 6 through 12, or middle school and high school. And they primarily serve the Oakland Unified School District because they do provide transportation. They pick up from schools and then also drop students off at home after program has finished. Within that education program, there is a gardening program. So the youth work in several gardens that the program runs. They also have a too big program, tobacco use and prevention. And then they also do cultural programming. They have a summer program, which is usually 2 to 3 weeks in the summer. They also do field trips throughout the year. They've done camping field trips. They work in partnership with other organizations such as the Waterside Workshop, where they worked on building a canoe and doing things with Alcatraz and so that's one of our departments. We also have the foster department that certifies native foster homes. And that is part of the work of ICWA. The Indian Child Welfare Act is keeping, in the unfortunate event that a child is removed from their family, the priority under ICWA is that that child is placed in a native foster placement to maintain culture, connections to culture, and resources. So we can certify native foster homes. And then finally, the department that I work for or under, or the department that I supervise, is the counseling department. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so currently we have 3 grants that we're working under. One is an ICWA grant to provide ICWA supportive services to families, foster youth, youth that have aged out of the foster system but still need supportive services. And those services also extend to families, to biological families, but then also to the foster families. We have an all-state foundation healthy relationship grant. So this grant works primarily with domestic violence prevention and then also developing healthy relationships. This grant is for youth and transitional aged youth and young adults. So I believe it serves from like the age of 12 to 13 all the way to the age of 24. We do seasonal camps about 4 times a year, and those it's usually a day event for several hours. It usually has a cultural base to it, and primarily that has been for the younger youth who are not yet eligible for our after school program. So grades 3 to 5. And it's a way to kind of introduce them to our services, because a lot of the younger youth will then transition into our after school program once they are eligible. We have a NACHAC grant, which is the Native American Child Abuse Treatment Grant, which is to provide supportive services to children and families who have maybe, suffered from, have, experienced domestic violence, or maybe the family has experienced domestic violence or some other type of trauma. That grant allows us to provide counseling services to to the youth and then also to the families as well. We work in partnership with Alameda County to attend child family team meetings when a Native youth enters the child welfare services. So we attend those CFT meetings to provide culturally relevant supportive resources to families, and also support with any questions about ICWA, or helping act as a liaison for families to contact tribes or go through a process of identifying tribal connections, and going through the tribal enrollment process if they are not enrolled but are eligible for enrollment. Our services, so a youth does not necessarily need to be tribally enrolled to benefit from services. It depends on the grant and the program that they are that we are providing. But I know for like the counseling services, we do not require tribal enrollment. So we are able to serve self-identifying individuals for services. Let me go to the next slide. So we collaborate with other agencies such as the Native American Health Center, Washoe Native TANF, the Intertribal Friendship House, the Friendship House Association of American Indians in San Francisco, and they also have a lodge site in Oakland for Native mothers who are in recovery, who have children from the ages of 0 to 5, so they can actually stay at the lodge with their children, their young children. And we do 2 groups with the lodge currently: a positive Indian parenting group, which is a curriculum that was developed by the National Indian Child Welfare Association. And we also do provide the healthy relationship group. So we do each of those weekly. We also partner with different sports organizations for their Native American Heritage Night. We do an AICRC, we do an annual powwow ourselves, which is held, the past couple of years has been held at La Escuelita School in Oakland. We also partner with the Oakland Unified School District and Alameda County Children and Family Services. These are just some of the projects. We're always, seeking grant sources. And so these were some of the projects that we were working on or presenting. So we're always looking for ways to engage foster youth, developing culturally significant curriculum, and also creating leadership opportunities for the youth where they can self-identify, what services would be of value to them. Let me see, next. COVID presented a challenge for us, but we moved to providing a lot of services virtually. We currently, like, the education program has returned to doing in-person after school services. Some of the counseling services are still provided virtually, as families may feel more safe having the services virtually. So right now we're doing kind of hybrid services, both virtually and in person. We also travel, so we can do counseling in-home services, and we travel pretty wide. We have clients in Stanislaus County. I think that's the furthest county that we travel to currently. But we have, we try to serve the greater Bay Area. This is our contact information. There's our general number, our website, our physical address, and then we also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. And I believe that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that overview. Okay, we have about 10 minutes for questions for those of us who have remained on the call. And I think, unless someone has a huge question to ask, I can start us off for our panelists and ask a question about if you could describe any challenges or issues that you've noticed Native American families have experienced during the pandemic that would be important for the providers in the room to be aware of. Any of our panelists want to mention something about that? Let's see. Who can I see? I see Andrew. I don't know if there's, since you just spoke, if you'd like to touch on that. Or Karina.
I know that housing is always an issue, especially for families that we serve in CFT meetings. Housing can be a challenge, and to find resources.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that also, at the beginning of COVID, one of the things that many people had issues with, and I know in our community, was getting supplies and food, and nutritious food, and because it was difficult. Because Segorte Land Trust has access to working with local farms, we were able to do food distribution for elders and those that were immunosuppressed and working on the front lines, or those with small children. I think that the health center has also done some of that kind of work, and maybe also CRC. And so I think that that was one of the things that our local agencies banded together to do, was to try to address the issue of food. And we're still doing that work today.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I can ask another question. I know that I've heard a few of our partner providers ask me sometimes that, they know Native families are here, but they don't know that they're serving them. So I wonder if either of you have any suggestions for the folks in this room about how to, ask politely and respectfully, how to sort of figure out who's in the room and who they're serving, so they can make sure they're connecting them to the appropriate resources.
I was going to say, Andrew, you want to take that one? Or I think just to ask the question, is important, that we don't know who we're dealing with all the time. And just to say, do you have connection to a Native American tribe? Are you enrolled in a tribe, or is your family enrolled? I don't think that that's hard. I think as Native people, we ask each other all the time, who's your people? Who are you connected to? You know, who's your family? And so those questions aren't, I don't think, something that's out of the ordinary for Native people in our territories.
Are you going to say something, Andrew? I see you're on.
No, I was just going to agree, especially from like a counseling perspective. You know, we usually start our assessments just, you know, how do you identify, you know, what's your culture, what's your family, what's, you know, as open as possible so that they can identify all of their, you know, how they identify and what's important to them.
Wonderful. Thanks. I know that, you know, at First Five, we do track demographic data. And so how those questions are collected and analyzed as well, I think is really important to look at.
Yeah, that's really important that, you know, any assessment or demographic info includes, you know, those indicators of Indigenous or Native heritage. So.
Thank you. I saw a question come in saying, how do we speak with young children about the terrible things that have happened to Native peoples? Karina, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I think by telling the truth. I worked with young people around fourth grade curriculum, which has been the place where we start talking about Native Californians and missions. And I did probably years of work with the Oakland Museum, talking to hundreds, or if not thousands of kids. And I always talk to them about asking them if slavery was a good thing. And they'll all say no. And then I'll tell a story about what it might have been like to be taken from your family and your language taken away. And they get it. It's the adults in the back, their parents or teachers, that are squirming. The kids absolutely understand the difference between right and wrong. And if we wait until they're in college or high school to begin to talk about them, they're angry that you let this go on for so long, that you didn't tell them the truth. I think if we're going to, as a society, move forward about combating racism and all of the things that go with it, that we have to start telling the truth to history and to bring in experts to talk to young people about it and to look for that information and to give them and to answer their questions honestly. And even though it might be uncomfortable for you, understand that kids understand right from wrong and almost inherently. And so I think that's where we start.
That's great. Thank you. I see a request there to get Karina and everyone's contact information. So we'll make sure that we include that with a copy of the presentation, that the presentations that went out today for everyone who attended. And there's any other burning questions before we end today? No? Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you to our presenters, and thank you to all of you for attending and being interested in this topic and, you know, serving Native families in the Bay Area and learning more. And hopefully we'll see you all at the presentation next week on choosing appropriate books about Native Americans for children. So thank you. Bye, everyone.